come to a school board. Hey, I'm sorry. Your name is Jelante. Jelante is going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. After you.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Thank you. Hey, see that DeKalb football shirt on? What happens on Monday? Two-a-days. Yeah, two-a-days. All right. Public participation and recognition. Members of the public who wish to speak to the board should complete a request card prior to the meeting. This section of the meeting will be reserved for comments from the public. All comments should be limited to 3 minutes. Criticism of individuals is not in order. And I have one card from Becky Maskell. Where's Becky?
Hello. I am Becky Maskell. I am a District 428 teacher and lifelong community member. I come to you tonight with grave concerns regarding the enrollment numbers at Huntley Middle School. As of July 30th, the enrollment numbers at Huntley were 6th grade 309, 7th grade 290, and 8th grade 291. When estimating average class size, some people immediately suggest that the number of students in intensive special education classes and SOL classes should be subtracted from the enrollment numbers, pointing out that students in those programs often receive instruction outside of the general education setting. While that is true, it is important to keep in mind that the law requires schools to include students with special needs in the general education classes when doing so provides the least restrictive environment. However, let's look at a scenario that assumes that the students in those programs will not be included in the regular education population. Subtracting the number of students in those programs from the overall enrollment brings 6th grade to 281, 7th grade to 268, and 8th grade to 278. This creates class averages for core classes, math, language arts, science, and social studies, of 6th grade 35, 7th grade 34, and 8th grade 35. While even those numbers sound far from appealing, this is a best case scenario. It is even worse than it sounds. Because of the nature of scheduling, it is impossible to divide students perfectly evenly between classes. That means that we will have some classes that are below that average and some above, obviously creating many classes well over 35. Last year, our enrollment numbers were lower than they are this year. Last year, even with those lower numbers, we had many classes over 35. Today, I was told that Central Administration reports that the student-to-teacher ratio at both Flint Rosette and Huntley is 19:1. I'm not sure how that ratio is determined, and quite frankly, I find it absurd. I realize that schedules are not completed at this time. However, regarding the claim of a student ratio of 19:1 at Huntley, I would just ask that the board talk to Mrs. Dawkins and ask her to share with us the reality regarding most recent class sizes at Huntley. For several years, District 428 has tried to get families to register their students early so that the district can plan ahead and provide the best possible education for our students. Students are registered. We know the numbers. I urge you to use these numbers to make educationally sound decisions. Several years ago, the school board did not address the high enrollment numbers before school started. After students were scheduled and had attended classes for a month, the school board faced reality and hired additional teachers at Huntley. That meant rescheduling all the students. We literally lost a month of teaching that year. We have an opportunity to address this problem before school starts. I ask you tonight to make a pledge to provide an equitable education to all middle school students. I do not have the average class size for Flint Rosette. If their average is lower than Huntley,
Becky.
I've got 2 sentences left.
Okay.
Perhaps some students could be moved to Flint Rosette. If their class average is not below that of Huntley, I ask that you hire additional classroom teachers to create class sizes that are more conducive to student learning, and assure us that we will not have classes over 35. Thanks in advance for your time and attention to this important matter.
Well, normally we never respond to these sorts of things, but we were given a little bit of a heads up that this might be an issue and that it would lead to a lot of folks here, so I'm sure you're anxious to hear a response. And it's pretty straightforward. This board and administration's tried very hard to bring parity throughout the district, which is why we've initiated projects at places like Little John and Tyler that were neglected for so long. And it may be nothing more than in the form of a boiler that you never see. But I can tell you that the boiler at Little John today is far safer and far more reliable for the students and people at Little John than it was before. Having said that, what we can do is go off of numbers. And we have projected enrollments right now at Huntley Middle School of 733. It's only a projection. And it's based on what we know. There are chances that we could see an influx of students yet, but we haven't seen that in the housing yet. So we wouldn't know why there'd be an influx, but if there is, we'll deal with it. We are not unreasonable. We are not going to expect the students at Huntley to have 45 children in their class or 35 when the other school across town does not. So we will address this, but we have to go off of what we have and numbers. And the numbers we have as of August 5th, Clinton Rosette Middle School has 431 kids enrolled or registered. Huntley Middle School has 733 as of August 5th. That will continue to evolve and change. But at this time, these are the best numbers we have to work with. We also have classroom FTE of 27 at Clinton Rosette Middle School. At Huntley Middle School, we have an FTE, or full-time staff, of 45. Right now, that's where the 19.9 and 19.3 numbers come from. Yes, there are additional programs at Huntley, for sure. But we will continue to work to try and bring parity and equity to both schools. And we won't be able to do that until the final numbers are in. So all I can tell you is this is a classic example of where numbers, things got, I don't want to say blown out of proportion because we don't know yet. But we have to go with the numbers we have, and these are the numbers we have. And we're going to continue to do that. And when enrollments at either school warrant changes, we will make those changes. We are not going to ask any school to go through something that the other schools don't have to go through. No, there's, Becky, you've had your time. You've had your time. I'll have you removed if I need to.
Well, less than that. And
this board is going to commit to bring parity to both schools. Regardless of what you hear on Facebook, regardless of what someone says they've heard, we will commit to parity in both schools as best as we possibly can.
Did you last year?
Becky, your time is over. So that's all I'm going to say about that for tonight. But we will continue to work on it, and we are not going to ask your students or the students on any campus or any any school in town to have to be in a situation that is not comparable to other schools. We can't do it, we won't do it.
Is that a commitment to having 35
that's it.
students?
I've had enough. You are done.
Yeah.
That's a commitment to 35 or less in our class?
I agree with you 100%. I mean, we've always tried to bring it in schools, and I know it's going to keep us appraised of the situation as we go on.
Absolutely. All right, now, if there is no objection, we will change the agenda to move item 7A from the new business to this time in the board agenda, because we have to get introduced to a few things before we can take action on it. So if there are no objections, and I will ask for The approval of increase of 1.0 FTE bilingual kindergarten teacher at Founders Elementary and increase 1.0 FTE homeschool liaison at Jefferson Elementary. It's been recommended that the Board of Education approve an increase of 1 FTE bilingual kindergarten teacher at Founders and 1 FTE homeschool liaison at Jefferson Elementary and the relocation of 1 English designated kindergarten from Founders Elementary to Little John Elementary. Do I have a motion? Second? Discussion, please. Who's, nobody's gonna talk about this?
If anybody has any questions, I would say answer them.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, I wasn't at the last meeting, so sorry, Jen.
Sorry, not a problem.
Okay, very sorry about that. All right, let's vote on that. Roll call, please, Vicki.
Von Barnes,
Yes.
Vicki Hernandez Favor,
Yes.
Mary Hess,
Yes.
Tom Lucia,
Yes.
Tracy Williams.
Yes. All right, now we'll get back on the schedule here. The non-business consent agenda. It's been recommended that the Board of Education approve the non-business consent agenda items A through D.
Second.
Thank you, Vicki.
Vicki Hernandez Favor,
Yes.
Mary Hess,
Yes.
Tom Lucia,
Yes.
Tracy Williams,
Yes.
Von Barnes.
Yes. Yeah, Tish, would you like to introduce you?
I introduce to some and present to all Amana Quinette Parker, who is going to be the new assistant principal at Huntley Middle School. She comes to us from DeKalb High School, and she has been a teacher in the district for 7 years. So help me welcome.
You ready for this, Amanda? All right, well, welcome aboard. I'm glad to have you. Next, the approval of the tentative 2014-15 budget. Andrea Gorla, it's been recommended that the Board of Education approve the fiscal year 2014 and 2015 budget for public display in anticipation of adoption on September 16, 2014. Andrea.
Correct. So once again, we have to go through this process, and at this time, you would be adopting the tentative budget to go on display, and then in September, we actually adopt the budget. So in front of you this evening, we have actually in front.
I'm back.
Is the whole process in which we, and again, this is basically the same information we had gone through actually in May. And again, I can't emphasize enough that the budget is a fluid document. And these are the numbers that we know as of today that are incorporated in here. They're projections and estimates, but to the best of our ability from the information we've received from the state and the federal government, these are the numbers that we use. And the modified accrual, again, just basically all this is doing is shoring up all our expenses and revenue and putting them in the appropriate fiscal year, because at times they bleed over into another year, and we go through this process every year. One thing I will tell you that is significantly different from district to district, and it is confusing when you look at districts' financial information and you try and compare them all, is we do this deferment of property taxes. And so when you look at school districts' financial picture at the end of the year, sometimes school districts are reporting that on a cash basis, which means they receive all that tax money and they're showing all of that immediately. Some are on accrual, as we do. We shore up all those expenses and we put them in the appropriate year for our contracts and for our revenues. But on top of all of that, we take the money that we are receiving right now from property taxes and we push them into the future year. And not many districts do this, and this is a very conservative approach and allows us to react for when we have times in the economy, as we currently have experienced these last 5 to 6 years, of when the state has either slowed down the money in which they send to us or reduced the money in which they send to us. It almost basically gives us a year to plan to react to those situations. And when CPI a few years ago came in at 0.1%, every other district was scrambling to see what they could do because they're already spending that money that's coming in. We knew we were pushing that revenue out and had time to react to that. So quite a big difference, and when you look at our financial numbers, that's the component that really isn't reflected and compared from district to district. So for us, when we look at our year-end financials, that's at the worst position we'll be at during the year. For other districts, that's their best financial position. And we still haven't been able to get the state to really discern the difference in those two reporting requirements. So I'd like to place emphasis on it because it's not an apples-to-apples comparison. So that being said, moving forward, we're at the bottom part of this page here in the July and August where we're finalizing these numbers and we will have to take action on them. And then we have detailed out as we start this process in December and January to show where we had started with our deficit to any of the changes that have been made throughout the year. And then we shore up all those numbers as I stated, and then the next slide currently reflects where we believe we will end. So that's making all the changes. We did one thing because we did approve spending some of that $21 million so in technology component, and we pulled out some of the one-time expenditures to say really what we're looking at is nearly a $2.4 million deficit. Then general state aid, again, what I'd like to draw your attention to is under the 2013-14 school year, you will see a cumulative total of $3.4 million. That is what we have not been paid by the state. Okay, that is when they started prorating our money and the state is basically saying we don't have enough money to pay you on the normal basis of how this formula is calculated. So that is how much we have been shorted by the state. Now for the 2014 fiscal year, on again a conservative approach, we're saying because early in the year they were saying perhaps they could only pay us 85% of that general state aid, which would be another $2.5 million loss to us, for a total of these 4 years of almost $6 million. Now, what we do know is for every 1% that they change on that proration is equivalent to about $167,000. If we get back up to that 89% proration, which is sad that we're on the edge waiting to get a prorated amount, that would add $670,000 to our revenue. Still not 100% of what the state should be paying us. Now, where we stand today in our projections, and we worked actually with our Finance and Facilities Committee on this, is we have built in for future years because of student enrollment and growth 5 additional FTE. What we currently have filled the positions is for 3.5 FTE. So you'll see a social worker, a psychologist, a kinder teacher, and a half-time middle school counselor have already been hired for these areas or are in the works of being hired. That still leaves us a cushion, and that is you had stated, as we monitor what the enrollment looks like is when we end up adding to those costs here. So there is somewhat of a buffer in here. And then moving forward, we detail out for you, and I'm certainly not going to walk through all these numbers for you, but it's itemized. Our revenue is itemized by fund, and it's broken down by local, state, and federal money if you'd like to see more detail to it. And this will be on our website, so you can take a look at it in further detail. And then what we do is layer in the pictorial view. One enhancement we made to this year is someone describing briefly what local resources are. And again, the majority of that is our property taxes. And so the burden really is placed on our homeowners and businesses for the money that comes into the school district. Next, of course, is the state at almost 29%. and then is the federal government. So in total, that's what our revenue budget would look like. Likewise, we do the same breakdown and itemization for our expenditures by fund. However, we break them down by object, which you see each individual line item, which is salary, benefits, purchase services, materials, and capital and such. So that's broken down by each fund. And then we put the pictorial on that to put down a pie chart for you. And then we describe briefly what each of those areas are. So you can see the majority of our money, again, because we are a service industry, is in human resources, being the salaries and benefits. One thing that people do get confused upon when they see the word tuition up there, and tuition means they are our students that we have to place to an outside school to meet the needs for those students. So it's not tuition for folks who are in our system, it is for our students. And then the next slide is actually a new slide. And in response to a question that actually a board member had, was to compare what has happened to our EAB, a historical perspective. What we additionally had layered in through the request as well is what do the other districts within our county look like as well. So in here we have, again, pictorially for you as well as the finite numbers of what has happened to our equalized assessed valuations. And so people understand as the decline in the values of our property happen, we are supposed to be getting an increase from the state to make up for that loss. So when they start prorating that general state aid, it is most impactful to the school districts who rely a little more heavily on general state aid than others. So this really signifies to you how long it is taking to creep out of this very horrible financial environment in 2009 when basically the housing crash happened. Here we are in 2013, and we are still seeing significant decreases in our property values. So as quickly as the rise came, it takes twice as long to work yourself out of these financial turmoil positions, and therefore you need to be all that more cautious of your spending moving forward. But as you could see, we're not alone in all of that. If you look across, and every district has lost the value. And then therein lies the question and the answer somewhat to some sorts of why doesn't the state have enough money to spread among all of our districts? Because if everybody is falling in property value, the state now has to push more money into the school system, which begs another question, and we look forward to the next slide, and just take a look at overall where we stand from our beginning balance to the ending balances once you factor in all the revenues and expenditures, and there we lie with almost $3.5 million operating deficit and $5.6 million grand total. Again, not to be alarmed by the bottom line, because capital projects are in there, and because of the timing of that throws that number off, meaning the revenue came in when we actually received a lot of that construction grant money, but the money going out is done in a different fiscal year. So not to ignore that bottom line, but it's a timing thing, and we're not so rattled by that bottom line. Then moving forward, is our financial profile, and the state scores all school districts based on this. But like I said, there are differentiations in how you're reporting those final numbers. That downward line is because our debt from our referendum is now coming down. So that scale is now starting to go down. But when you look at historic information on the next slide, along with where do all the other districts reside, this is how we're broken down as far as to how many districts now are in financial recognition, review, early warning, and then watch. So you can start to look at those numbers as some districts have consolidated due to the financial prices, and then a lot are still doing well, but they're doing well because of, unfortunately, what we are all living is increased class sizes, reductions in expenditures throughout school districts' budgets. That's how you've been able to maintain and stay afloat with future years. And then as we move forward again, this is a slide we just incorporated at the last presentation in May. But again, I'm putting this here to emphasize to folks how that disparity among our Illinois school districts really look. And there's a big problem here, and since we have people in the audience, you should all know there is a Senate Bill 16 that is active out there right now, which is basically examining general state aid and how to redistribute state money to school districts. Because when you look at the bottom of this chart, the most, at least to me, saddening thing is when you look at an elementary school district and see that the lowest schooling, the lowest expense per pupil sits at $6,362. That's what an elementary school is spending per child. To the highest level of a school district in the state of Illinois, spending $28,497, almost 4.5 times the difference of what the lowest is. That is a huge disparity, and you can look at the high school districts and the unit districts, which is what we're categorized as. From the lowest to the highest is 3 times that per pupil amount. And yet the outcome of our test results and all of that are being looked at in a somewhat equalized fashion, even though somebody could spend 3 times more than another district. So this is getting a lot of play to really examine how do we redistribute general state aid money in a fashion that would be more equitable, and that's not equal to all, and we know that. But at least leveling this playing field a little bit more than what we're seeing here today. So again, that bill is out, and it's Senate Bill 16, and actually it has passed the Senate, and it's pending in the House of Representatives. And another component, actually, as we look to the next slide, is one significant portion of general state aid. And in the new formula that they're looking at would be weighted, and here's where our gain would be. If you take a look at this slide, is quite significant of where our poverty level within our district sits. This is a historical perspective. From 2007, the orange bars represent the number of students housed here, not enrollment, because some students go outside our district for education. These are the number of students who have been housed here over from 2007 to 2014. And then the level of poverty that has changed within our district over these years. Okay, so we have had, and we have been told, and a lot of parents who call us and complain about many things in our system have always said in these last few years, I am the family who has 1 foot in the door of being the next free and reduced family. This is what truly has happened to our district. The whole significance of what has happened in the financial market and moving forward has played a huge impact on school districts. And when your level of poverty is reaching this of sorts, there are different types of challenges that are presented to us. So if you really take a look at, in 1 year, between 2012 and 2013, we grew 10%. 10% more of our students are living in a poverty home than were the previous year. Those are significant numbers to jump in a year. So we went from 43% of free and reduced population to 53%. And then the next slide, again, just demonstrates where we stand with other districts within DeKalb County. No other district is even touching where we sit at those levels. And in fact, where you see the line going across, in the general state aid formula, there is a component for poverty level. So anybody who is below that solid line going across is not receiving a poverty portion in the general state aid plan. Like when you see the other 2 or 3 districts actually are receiving that. And again, we are quite significantly higher than any of the other districts. So when you compare information overall, these are things that really need to be weighted and considered because it's not an even playing field for everybody. And then moving on to the next slide is one that you're typically used to looking at. The bars again represent our revenues and expenditures. The red line is our fund balance. And the toughest part of all of this is holding that red line somewhat steady to not see that decline. We've also incorporated in the percentage of fund balance to expenditures because we do have a district policy of how much fund balance we want to carry so that we are able to react to these times in which the state is not paying or perhaps slows down the money that comes into the school system. And then the final slide here. Oh, actually, there's one more after that, but this one, again, just demonstrates as we're stacking all the funds on top of each other in a historical perspective. And why we jump up is because of that grant money. And the pink area is showing where the majority of that money is parked, of that $21 million. A good part of that is in working cash to help those fund balances. And then the very last slide is just really our progress monitoring within the business area, which includes facilities and food service, transportation, finance, is we are building a budget book which is going to include more narratives and charts and graphs that we've included, and that will be rolling out in September. We are starting to bridge budget information and student performance information and data together and align our charts and graphs so that everybody becomes more comfortable at looking at the charts and graphs the same way you see them in finance as you do for student performance. And the importance of keeping our bond rating at the AA's, because if we ever have to issue bonds or refund bonds, the cost is tied to exactly what that rating is, no different than if you go out for a mortgage. And depending on what your credit score is going to drive what your interest rate is. That's what that bond rating is equivalent to the school district. One outstanding piece is we currently are in negotiations with one of our units, the teacher assistants. So that could waive our picture a little bit depending on where we settle. And that concludes.
All right, before we go to discussion, I'm going to ask for a motion. It's been recommended the Board of Education approve the fiscal year 2014-2015 budget for public display in anticipation of adoption on September 16, 2014. Do I have a motion? Thank you. Second. Thank you. Okay, discussion. Anyone? Well, one thing, and I do appreciate this, Andrea, was one of the last graphs you put on there that showed how the poverty level had risen throughout, not only DeKalb, but the entire county.
Yes.
And it's my understanding that it's not uncommon for the largest city in the county to have a disproportionate growth in poverty. So, somewhat, I guess, consistent with what you see other places.
Right.
But it is profoundly helpful, and I guess it really, I know I see a lot of faces here I haven't seen before. Your fall elections are going to be profoundly important this year because your state representatives and people that are running for state office are the ones that control a big piece of this. And feel free to call them, let them know what your concerns are, what you support, because without pressure, we just haven't seen any real change for a long time.
Right.
So
And
encourage all of
that
you to-
Senate bill will redistribute the wealth. And that means some districts that are wealthier will not get as much money, and the districts who are more in need will get more. So please let your voices be heard by people, because that's been a hard one to pass. And it's been a long time in coming, and people need to understand a little bit more about the disparities from district to district.
Okay, if there's no further discussion, Vicki, roll call.
Mary Hess,
Yes.
Tom Mattia,
Yes.
Tracy Williams,
Yes.
Colin Barnes,
Yes.
Vicki Heard in favor.
Yes.
All right, thank you, Andrea. Next, the parent-student agreement for one-to-one technology. This is an information item. Brian.
May I ask a point of order? I came a little late, so I apologize. And teacher was speaking. Does that mean that none of these are accepted and no one else may speak next meeting?
Yeah, we've gone past that.
So you're not accepting them at all?
No, we've moved on.
Okay.
You're welcome to come back to the next meeting. All right, Brian?
Okay, what we shared out were a couple documents that, as part of the one-to-one initiative for the 8th graders with the Chromebooks, that the building principals at both middle schools, some of the instructional assistants, Denise, some of us in technology, have worked together with the tech committee to create and adapt to what appears to fit our district best. And so really, you know, you have the two documents in front of them. The one document is really just straight up information that the parents have available online on our Chromebook site. The other document is the document that the students and parents are going to sign off on and initialize. And so during the rollout nights, we have a small rollout night to test things out, to test our processes out next week. The parents and students are going to come in, they're going to fill out a form online, and at that point then they go off into the auditorium with the building principals to go, you know, through responsibilities and how things are going to be handled. While that's going on, we're actually going to print that document out, grab the Chromebook, grab the laptop bag, get things together, do barcoding and scanning. A label is going to be put on the laptop itself. It'll be put on the bag and also put on the parent's sheet, which will all be, again, filled out based on their responses there, and then they're just going to sign off and initial them as they're going through, and then the parents and students will go off into another room and do their first time login and make sure things are working for them and answer any other questions. And that's really what that is. I don't know if Tish or Tim have anything else, you know, in regards to that night. I mean, it's just the sign-off sheet.
The only thing that I'll say is we're always looking for volunteers. It's going to take a lot. So if you want to email me or talk to me after,
Yeah.
we're always looking for volunteers.
He is our workforce drive is Tim. Yeah, he's in charge of all the people. So
I put in a plug everywhere too.
Yeah.
Whenever.
so, but yeah, like I said, it's information item, but they will have a document that they're signing. We will scan that in, keep that in our records at the district, and also then in an Excel sheet we'll have all the information they filled out, as well as the asset tag and serial number of the devices.
Questions, Mary?
I'm just wondering how you came to the decision to waive the insurance cost for this year.
Just as part of the pilot. So when we were going through, because of the warranties and things like that we have in place already in the bags that we're using, which I have the bag and device in here, you know, we as a group, we went through that because we don't know what to charge. You know, what that actual fee should be. A lot of districts self-insure. Others hire a third party out and allow the parents to buy into that. So really what we're doing for that first year to help with our budgeting going forward is we're self-insuring, keeping all the documentation in-house. We've worked that out with Andrea. She's working on a couple different account numbers for both Lincoln and the two middle schools to use to monitor repair costs and things like that. Yes.
Do you have enough staff to take care of the repairs? Or do you assume there'll be no repairs needed?
We know there will be some repairs necessary. We don't think it's going to get beyond what we can do with ourselves and with some of the clubs that we're looking to form with some students.
Make sure that's in the minutes.
No, we're talking about this rollout, not if we're going district-wide, but yeah.
Anyone else? No. Well, thanks, Brian. I got a chance to see the device tonight. You know, first time I'd seen it up close, and it's impressive and it's exciting. So good luck to all of you. It should be something. I'm anxious to hear how it goes. Yes, ma'am.
Under the, again, under the warranty insurance, is this something that's just for us, or is that going to the parents?
Is this
use of technology Chromebook agreement?
Right, that's actually the document they're going to sign off of and have a physical copy of.
So it has a price for first repair, second repair,
Correct.
so forth, but there's nothing for replacement of entire device.
I think when we did the device, or when we did this originally, we didn't have the full set cost on the bag, and because it depends on whether they lose or the bag is stolen, the laptop is stolen, or the whole thing. We could look at what the actual price is. It's a working document. As we're going into, it's a I hate to call it a live document, but it's a live document that we will, really finalize with when we have all the numbers together as we're going through.
So before they sign off on it,
Yeah.
those numbers will be
Yeah.
there. Okay.
Yeah, and so you're just looking for what the whole replacement cost is for the laptop. Okay, sure.
I could present that to my child. And
Yeah.
say, look what we're looking at. And,
Yeah, and some of the stuff we've looked at, it's there's like I don't want to throw a department under. There's a AP class. The replacement cost of that book is more than or equal to the replacement cost of this laptop and bag. From one of the forms that we've seen handed out. So.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Next, the adoption of Exhibit 5120E, the Code of Ethics for Illinois Educators and Administrative Procedures. 5120AP2, Employee Conduct Standards. Jim Foreman.
My privilege to bring to you tonight just as an informational item that for you to peruse and to evaluate. Basically, you currently have in board policy code, the policy 5120, which is the Code of Ethics and Conduct, and it's a broad, wide sweeping, no detail kind of policy. And it comes from your association policy service. Also with your policy service includes some additional things that can be included. And this is really something that I think will become a task that we will be undertaking in all areas. This is just the first one that I'm able to bring to you as an information item. Attached to this particular policy is also an exhibit, which is a code of ethics for Illinois educators, which is developed by the policy service. And then additional to that is the administrative procedure, which kind of basically one builds on top of the other. One's very generic, one gets more specific, and the other one is how do we carry that out. And so what I'm asking you to do is take time to be able to look through this. I think you'll find it very understandable because it's in all of our worlds that we live in, not just education world like some policies you might see. And so I would like you to look at it, start considering it, and the intent of administration, unless we get some unusual, unanticipated feedback from you, would be to put this on the track toward adoption in the coming meetings. Something that I think is lacking not only in this one area, but other areas of the exhibits and the administrative procedures in our policy.
Any questions?
Yeah, I just applaud you for taking this on. I think it's needed as an update.
There.
I was just wondering, so it has a couple of names, Code of Ethics for Illinois Educators. Is that going to include all staff, even like those that work, are just coaches in the district?
We are all educators in the
Okay.
system.
Okay.
And the expectations of the code of conduct is from every employee.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jim. All right, next we have an information item, recommended revisions to the Board of Education policies. First reading, the Board of Education will hold the first reading of recommended revisions to Board of Education policies as attached. The non-discrimination coordinator and complaint manager will now be James Borman, Director of Human Resources. Do we have a consensus to bring this back for an action item? All right, very good. Before we adjourn, I skipped over committee reports. Do we have anything from anyone? No? Well, I would just like to say I had a chance to go to the 4-H fair this weekend down at Sandwich, and there's a number of DeKalb students that participate in 4-H and the livestock show. You'd be amazed, and it's a blast. And DeKalb, being an old agricultural community that is not gone, they still did very well. Lots of grand champions. Ms. Kelsey Favor was a champion, and others. But the real highlight is when you see there was a 4th or 5th grader, I'm not sure what grade he's in, but he goes to Jefferson. And I saw him down there, and I said, "Brian, how's it going?" And he said, "Pretty good." I go, "How'd those rabbits do?" And he said, "Well, the mean one got second." And I thought, I don't know how to ask about the other one, if he's the nice one or not. And I said, "A mean rabbit sounds like a jumbo shrimp. It just doesn't make sense, you know." And he says, "No, he's mean." I said, "Well, what the other one do?" And he said, "Well, he was too fat for me to show." But he lives in the Jefferson area and raises these rabbits in the back of his home. And so my point is, even in town, there are kids that are getting tremendous benefit from 4-H even yet. And it's quite an event, and well done to all the DeKalb 428 kids that participated, and there were a number. It's much larger than you would think. So it's not really a committee, but it was a fun report, a fun summer event. So 428. All right, next we can go on to adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Thank you. Second? All in favor say aye. Aye. All right, let's see you next time.